Okay. All right. What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Uh, the reason I'm doing this one is because I saw a clip of I think the Lakers doing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Ginsburg. I'm sorry. Um, before the game, and some people have an issue with that, and some people don't. But what I'm gonna talk about is why um, sports and politics are interwoven, and people seem to forget or don't know or don't understand that the two politics in boxing are really tied together in the sense of you know when you think of boxing you think of somebody in the blue corner, somebody in the red corner. Well, which means Democrat versus Republican. That basically started as a fight, so people would pick the best fighter to represent their side and they would fight it out. What's up, Ron? What's up, gangster? So, what's necessary was, I don't get these people. What was necessary was, during what's happening? You have to, you got to take into consideration what goes on. What's up, Sean? That all this stuff is together. Now, people say, they don't want, you don't want um, politics and religion together, right? But that's a different relationship, even though politics and religion are together. Church and state, they say are separate, but not really. So, sports is just another avenue that makes money. That's another platform that politicians use. So when people have an issue with politics and sports, they seem to forget that politicians use sports for their own benefit. This is why every year, you know, every person who wins a championship goes to the White House. Every football, baseball, basketball, hockey, everything that's considered American sports. You know, yeah, exactly, Justin. What's up, Dante? You know, it's not hard to watch to me because all of this stuff is intertwined. I think the issue becomes people have an issue with athletes talking politics or particular athletes talking politics. I mean, let's just say, for in hypothetical sense, if black athletes started talking conservative, I don't think people would have a problem with it. I don't think all of the sports watchers who have issues with athletes being quote unquote social justice warriors would have a problem if LeBron was wearing "Make America Great" hats again. I don't think they have a problem. All of a sudden, politics would be okay in sports. It wouldn't be a big deal. You know, yeah, I'm gonna get to that. You know, but this is the aspect that's kind of funny is because uh, sports and politics have been hand in hand for so many decades. It's probably over a century. I'm sorry, but so now people forget the civil rights movement basically integrated sports in the first place. So that's politics getting into sports. You wouldn't have the sports as you know it if it wasn't for the civil rights movement. So that means people pushed, their political agendas, and it spilled over into the avenues of sports. Ultimately, because going back to boxing, that was the first kind of integration of sports, but there was a lot of lynchings going on when black people won. It wasn't just Jack Johnson. People forget that that happened with pretty much every other fighter that was black. So they're intertwined. They're interwoven. They're together. Because at the end of the day, if they wasn't, you wouldn't see all these politicians at the games. They use their platform to connect with the people and get around the people. It isn't just a getaway. The same thing goes on. We like to talk about the players, but nobody complains about the owners talking about their political alliances and agendas and what they want pushed. Because at the end of the day, it's about everybody gets to present their agenda, except for the quote unquote athlete or the people who most resemble the athletes. You know what I mean? Like, so now we're living in a society where free you want tickets and free speech at the same time. Which doesn't make sense. So to me, it's one of those situations where, okay, you want to be able to go to the game, you want to be able to watch the game, you want to be able to do whatever you wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just Sonny Liston. You know, they didn't really like Joe Louis, to be perfectly honest. Of course, they didn't like Ali, but you know, same issues go on with people like Floyd Patterson and Sugar Ray Robinson. It's the same thing that goes on, and people seem to forget that before quote unquote blacks was involved in sports and entertainment, that's what the Jewish community was involved in sports, entertainment, and basic and crime, basically. Those are the three major things they were known for. I hate to say that, but that's what it was because they were getting they were having issues in America being persecuted, and it would play out on the baseball fields. So same thing that goes on with Jackie Robinson. He never stood for the anthem. You know, everybody understands this already. So the thing about it is who you like and who you don't like drives most people's anger or frustration or hatred because I don't want to watch this and I don't want to watch that. Unfortunately, I got to say most people are lying and they full of it because when it's Hispanic Heritage Month, that's a political ploy. So you don't care about, you know, uh, it being a Hispanic um, a Hispanic overview of the NBA. You don't care about that. When they do it with Asians, you don't care about that. You know, so this idea that that's just we just trying to be inclusive. It's a political move to get people to vote. You know, come watch the games, come spend your money here, and come be welcome and come and when we put up stuff, support it. Just like when they was going back to the Kaepernick thing, when nobody was tripping at the NFL, the military paid the NFL to be there. What's up, Rasta? Nobody cared that the NFL, that the military paid for that. The United States government paid for that to push an agenda. This is where we're at, where people don't want to be honest about the reality that we live in. And the reality that we live in is basically, you know, everything's politicized. People forgot when Rush Limbaugh was got on Monday Night Football, and then he just started fresh out the gate talking about how Donovan McNabb, a black quarterback, wasn't smart enough or whatever. Fresh out the gate, and at the time he was in line to be in a purchase group to buy the Rams. But people forget about stuff like that. How can somebody who does political radio wind up being a Monday Night Football host? Simple. Because the sports and the politics are intertwined. You know, this is where we're at in society. You know, that's that. That's not what I'm talking about, Sample. I'm just talking about the holistic thing of this is actually what America is. Because the billionaire owners are pushing political agendas. Nobody has a problem with that. Robert Kraft has a political agenda. Nobody has a problem with that. Jerry Jones has a political agenda. Nobody has a problem with that. The Rooney family that own the Steelers have a political agenda in America and in Ireland. Nobody has a problem with that. It's one of those things where people, what's the guy that owns, um, what is his name? Paul Allen. Microsoft. They've been working with the politics for forever and a day. Is it Bobby Brown got you cold blooded, Mike? You know, but that's the thing about politics. People are pushing whatever they feel is important, and at the end of the day, you're gonna use sports and entertainment as a platform. Sports in particular, because sports is one of the few things in America that everybody who doesn't agree might still be in support of the same thing in each city, which means you know you can be on a different political side, a different religious side, a different race, a different gender, but y'all still might be fans of y'all city's team. You still might be avid fans of your hometown team. You know, so I don't care what it is. They're both a political agenda. Dante, they both a political agenda. A lot of times it seems like when white people have, thanks, Lee, when white people have a political agenda, it's okay. When black people have a political agenda, it's something. Robert Kraft is an individual. He has his agenda, and it ain't just personal, and it ain't just private. He's not having an agenda that just works for Robert Kraft. That's asinine. He has business partners. He has business interests. He has family. He has friends. He has a whole community. He has a city of people that he wants to benefit over his politics. And the vast majority of them people look like him. And all of those people don't agree with his agenda, but they're going to benefit from it. This becomes a problem when it comes to speaking of, you know, what people want athletes to do. And sometimes, to be perfectly honest, I think it's kind of ridiculous that people. I got you. My bad. That's what I. And let me back up. It ain't about me being right. It's just making my point. You make your point, I make mine. That's all. So let me say that. Um, but a lot of times people have benefited off of athletes so many times. This is why they used to. This is why they sent athletes, and they've done it for decades on those USO tours, because you're using sports as a way to bump up morale for the military, and at the same time keep the soldiers in tune. The same thing happens with when people, presidents make their brackets and their predictions of who's going to win and who's going to lose. All these things come into play, and people sometimes don't think about it, but sports, for one, have owners for sure, and the owners have businesses for sure. You know, Johnson and Johnson, Microsoft, Home Depot, Alibaba, um, what is that? Shoot, real estate development. Um, it's more in tech. Johnson and Johnson, I know that one. So that's pharmaceuticals in a sense. What's up, Adora? Uh, Oil. You know, some people inherited fortunes or whatever, and they kept teams like that. I'm missing a lot of people because there's a lot of different ways people have become owners. But that being said, advertisement, media, that was another one because the Chicago teams have were invested in advertisement and media. So what winds up happening is these owners have certain platforms that they outright use and circulate sometimes funds and income and sometimes um, how do you put that? Um, kind of wealth distribution between everybody else. So this is why you some of these ads that are up. That's because these owners have stake in some of these businesses. So these are the ads that's going to play. So now, you know, now this affects things like, say, merchandising. And what I mean by merchandising is people forget that what the new era hats, those fitted hats, right? There was an era, the fitted hats with the team logos. They have a military edition of those. They have a patriotic edition of those. They have a breast cancer awareness edition of those. So a lot of times when you have merchandise, teams market whatever their agenda is at that particular time through merchandising. And I should know because I got some of those hats. Some of the jerseys are the same way. They had the jerseys with the camouflage in them. So this is where we at. Black men have done that already. I think just for me as a person thinking about politics, just as a black man, you know I think we have an issue with we want people to do what we want them to do right now, and not understanding we've already done something. So should we go back to it? Absolutely. But athletes are gonna do, they have people that inform them. If you want the athletes to do something, you got to get to know the athletes for them to speak on your behalf. They got agents. A lot of their agents ain't black. So the things that they have an entourage that's black. Their family's black. But their accountant, 9 times out of 10, ain't black. You know, their their not advertisement, but endorsements, 9 times out of 10 ain't black. So those are the people that are in their ear for the most part. Their investment ideas or are normally people who teach them how to invest. What's up, JR? Are people who are not black. So we're assuming that these people are going to watch enough, black YouTube and listen to enough black radio to get the point. No, I mean Kyrie Irving did watch YouTube. That's why he thought the Earth was flat. He admitted that. But so if those people are coming along over time, you're gonna see more and more people doing that. More and more people are gonna do that. But for now, you gotta take what you get. And political agendas evolve. People forget that Jim Brown used politics. It wasn't just Jim Brown. Jim Brown, Bill Russell, shoot. Oh, damn! I want to say Kareem, Will. It was a whole Fred Williamson. All of them guys came together back in the '60s. Muhammad Ali, all of them. They had a whole coalition that started in the '60s. But people sometimes haven't taken into consideration part of the dumbing down of part of the dumbing down of our community has also been intertwined with sports and politics. Because for those guys in the '60s, yeah, thank you, John Carlos. For those guys to be so informed, if you look back at it, you see a lot of effort put into making sure athletes become isolated. Because you got to think about it. In the 60s, you got that. And then in the 70s, people were whispering about OJ, you know, not really wanting to be black. So you started getting that isolation thing. What's up, John? You know, yeah, I remember that. I talked about it earlier. So this is why you see a lot of these athletes, taken away from the community because the politics and sports were involved heavily in the black community because people forget that for the vast majority until maybe the 70s, most black successful people lived in black neighborhoods. So they did have the ear of the community because you were always living in it. Now if you get on like that, you can move out of that neighborhood and you can move your family out of that neighborhood. And guess what? Now you're not as tied to the agenda of the community. So and that's also the thing about um, the political aspects of college because you know that's how HBCUs wind up getting drained dry of all their talent, and how predominantly white institutions got all this talent. They started making all this money. It's because of the integration of sports, and people forget that a lot of during the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of Hall of Famers in sports that came from historically black colleges because they couldn't play at white colleges. So when you look back at it, it's like, oh, this is what's been going on, you know. And then, what's up, GG? It ain't no big thing, Terrence. So now it's not a big thing for people to go, you know, Deacon Jones, Mississippi Valley, right? It was Delta at the time. People forget that. Jerry Rice, greatest football player of all time, Mississippi Valley. You know, so when you mention the top 5 or 10 football players of all time, I would say I know Jerry Rice is going to be there. I know Walter Payton is going to be there. Right. Oh, I know. I know that corrupt also. Hold on for a second, y'all. Um. Okay. Okay. So, and I'm missing a gang of people. I can tell you that right now because I'm not even thinking about it off the top of my head. But what winds up happening over the years is to take these. It's not just taking the young bodies out of the community; it's taking the young minds out of the community. No, Barry Sanders went to Oklahoma State. Barry Sanders went to Oklahoma State. You know, but because I remember when Bob Lanier was the middle linebacker, he went to Baylor, but it was considered people don't the evolution of even football. People thought black people weren't smart enough to play quarterback. We weren't smart enough to play middle linebacker, and we weren't smart enough to play safety because those are supposed to be brain positions. And that's why I brought up Bob Lanier. So he broke the mold in that because he was the Chiefs linebacker. I want to say that was Bob Lanier. Willie Lanier. Tripping. His number was 63. And ironically, no, Willie Lanier, he did go to a HBCU. What happened was he went to historically black college, and Michael Singletary went to Baylor and wore number 63 because he wanted to be Willie Lanier. That's what happened. You know, this is Rome. Got you. So when people got to the learn the HBCU, yeah, but you remember they ran. Walter Payton went to the University of Washington because he lived in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. You know, but he had to go to Canada because of that. There was another black man who went to, I forgot his name actually. He was a quarterback at San Diego State. And they didn't draft him because he was black. And right now he's like one of the top quarterback coaches in the nation. Everybody sends their kids to him because he's highly respected because everybody knows that he could play, and he was actually would have been a great NFL quarterback, but they didn't draft him because of his race. So, that's a political thing also. What the heck? So now you deal in this society where, oh, we don't put sports into it. Well, you got to. Sports and politics mix because we say the game is politics. It's funny how sports and politics are just as intertwined as sports and gambling. Nobody says, you should, gambling and sports don't go together. But gambling is criminal. You know what I'm saying? Gambling has just as long as a history in sports. Actually, gambling, sports, and politics all run together concurrently because they all came together. Thank you. Yeah, Doug, Steve, you know, Durham, what's happening? So when people think, oh man, I don't want to deal with this politics stuff, unfortunately, you're gonna have to. Because it was politics that put these athletes in these that put these athletes in their circumstances in the first place. You know, so since I don't see why people like watching me, like they ain't got no business of their own, but whatever. Um, it becomes a thing where how are you going to operate in a society when you set up a society using politics and it's created the atmosphere that you live in and it created the athletes and the sports that you have. Same thing about, you know, are people tripping about globalizing the whole sport of let's go overseas, let's make sports global? No, politics was brought into that fold where you can bring people from Central America, South America, the Caribbean, Africa, um, Asia, Europe, even Australia to play a sport in another country as basically an immigrant or an expat. They don't even have citizenship over here. But in the idea to make as much money as possible and stretch out the game as global as possible, nobody has a problem with that. James Harrison. You mean James Harrison? I think James Harrison went to a small school. I'm not too sure. I can't say it with James Harrison. Yeah, I brought up Jerry Rice, but it's a political thing. And at the end of the day, you know, I got friends who are Spurs fans. You wouldn't have Manu Ginobili if it wasn't for politics and sports. You wouldn't have Tony Parker if it wasn't for politics and sports because it wouldn't mix. So at the end of the day, you don't have to give deference to it, but um, you have to figure you got to just add it into the mix. You know, Kent State. Okay, okay. This is where a lot of us go wrong though, because what ends up happening is everybody like we don't think about people like John Rocker. Like, and I brought this up on another video. When that Oakland A's coach threw up the Nazi symbol, you know, when the Oakland A's coach threw up the Nazi sign, and he didn't get fired. So when you got to think about it, you think it's a problem, Taz. I just think it's been intertwined since the beginning. I don't think they're separating because I don't think they're gonna separate anything. That's what I said earlier. Like, what's up, Unc? Sports is the only thing that unifies the divided people. So that's part of the reason why they're intertwined. It's people that you don't agree with politically that are fans of your team. Y'all wear the same hat. Y'all got the same jersey. Y'all like the same player, but because sports unified that. But that's part of the issue. You know, it, when Mahmoud Abdul Rauf was did his prayer, that was political. And a lot of times people don't think about the media uses certain things as cannon fodder to make sure people get fired. Now, let me go way back real quick. Kurt Flood is how sports and politics are mixed. You wouldn't have free agency if it wasn't for Kurt Flood. But Kurt Flood was black. Kurt Flood did some questionable things too at the time, but the free agency thing, that was his choice to want to be able to go to a different team. He lost his career behind that. But baseball and every other sport benefited from it. But they politicized him to make him a martyr and a scapegoat for race relations and business relations and intertwining that with slavery and all this other thing. Same thing, politics came into play with Allen Iverson moving fast forward in the time. They didn't want him being successful, so they politicized the fight that he wasn't in. If anybody remembers that back in the day, there's a video of him walking, leaving the bowling alley while everybody's fighting, but he went to jail behind it because he was an athlete, and he was a star athlete, so they had to make an example out of that. So this is how things come together. Right, the gladiator sports. Yeah, I'm not bringing up Rome, but y'all brought up Rome. You feel me? But it's the same thing. So this is where we're at with society. People forget even with Muhammad Ali, they politicized him because he was the heavyweight champion of the world. Because at the same time, the Nation of Islam was considered like a radical group, like basically a hate group in America. So for a fighter to be in the Nation of Islam is anti-America. Thus, all these things you saw with Ali. Oh, I get what you're saying with Cap. I mean, to me, I always said, man, the Kaepernick thing is more of a position thing because nobody cared when Marshawn Lynch never stood for the anthem. He wasn't a quarterback. When a quarterback does it, it's a big deal. When other positions do it, it's not a big deal. What's up, Bo? But this is how we try to play around, like tiptoe around things in society where it's sports. Well, sports and politics are hand in hand. They're not gonna separate. They're not gonna go apart because I guarantee you, if you want sports and politics separate, you got to get rid of the national anthem at all the games, in every sport. There ain't no more national anthems. Ain't no more jets flying. You know, because it's always been, what brought the people to the game, and we're supposed to unify under the flag first. Even when you have a mega fight, what do? They play the national anthem for this country and the country, you know, and if the guys from another country, they play the national anthem for their country before the fight even starts. Everything is political. Now, in my opinion, I think what people are concerned about is at the end of the day, yeah, I do consider nationalism politics because unfortunately, this country is, how can I say this? This country's issues revolve around nationalism just like racism. Because when you say we're Americans and America stands for something, it all boils down to if it stands for something, the politics should say so. All of the racial fights in America are because this country isn't what it says it's supposed to be. Same thing, um, I can't necessarily say that's what it is for gender because when they made all these, the world was, it was all men are created equal. See, they never changed that for women, so you can't necessarily say that for women, right? But it's all one and the same, you know, because you want people to be patriotic. Hell, this let me say it this way: the New England Patriots. Think about that. The New England Patriots. That's a political team. It's nationalist but political, right? I remember the Washington Senators. I remember they had that. The Washington Nationals. I don't know what they was thinking with the Redskins, but whatever. You know, these things are based on politics. Um, what team am I missing? The 76ers. You know, even the Phillies in some ways because they try to represent the Liberty Bell and all that. So if you gonna strip away that from the sport? You gonna strip away the anthem from the sport? No, you're not. Are you gonna strip away the flag? No, you're not. Because all of this stuff is basically pieced together by some form of American propaganda. Like that's what I was talking about. And you got to understand the racial component to it because take the NBA and the NFL. You don't really hear nothing about Black history. You hear more about cancer, what cancer, military, Hispanics, Asians than you do about Black history, and of course whites because you know, and sometimes immigrants. All of these different months and occasions. So sports itself, it doesn't fairly represent Black people in America like it takes time to represent everybody else. The players Black, that's all we need. This is what goes on. And ironically, the same thing is going to happen politically with baseball because it's becoming such a Hispanic sport that nobody trips about those players talking about their, how can I put this, their community. You know, you got to think about it. Boston is a racist city, but Big Papi is a legend. Bill Russell's the most winningest Boston athlete in history, but they were so bad to him, he never went back. Even when they retired his jersey, he never went back. He was like, I don't even want to go. That's because of the climate of the country at the time, but it's still like that. You know, when you still got to talk about players and organizations, like you can't move up the ranks like other people because you don't own the teams and you don't hire. You know, that's what that's going with. But that's based on a lot of times political things. The same way, like let me let me put it to you like this. Michael Jordan is a prime example of the hypocrisy of sports and politics. Because on one end, people say, I don't, sports and politics don't mix. On another end, black and white people don't want Michael Jordan to get involved in politics. And at the same time, they'll use his shoes being sold as, oh, people in the long line for his shoes. Interesting. People in long lines for Google products and they getting fights, but you don't hear them talking about Paul Allen and Steve Ballmer. Like, look at these people out here beating each other up for these doggone cell phones and iPad knockoffs and televisions and whatnot. You don't hear that. You don't hear people say, oh, they shouldn't be involved in politics. You don't hear that. But, you change the race, you change the the issue. Because if I'm not mistaken, they had the same issue with Bob Johnson. You know, yeah, like in that. Got you. They had the same issue with Bob Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. Just make the money and shut up. You know, but that's the society we live in. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm kind of running around. I've been doing things, so I'm gonna get off here for now. I just, that was on my mind, so I just wanted to get it off my chest. I hope people understand where I'm coming from with that. But thank y'all for rocking with me, for the people who came. Peace, everybody.